Again, Case, First Pres, Collaborative, and really appreciate the opportunity to share. And Knapp asked me to reflect particularly on pastoral care, the pastoral care dynamic with our congregants. We've heard fantastic theological insights today, sociological insights, political insights, and I wanted to try to get more to the personal side. And when I think about, when I speak of pastoral care in an era of political polarization, I'm thinking of both your congregant as well as you, as well as you. For too many pastors are burning out. And this season of burnout as of late has been truly a crisis. A worrisome crisis. So, funny story, my senior pastor, David, is quite the prankster, and I've been known to be a little annoying myself, and so back in 2008, okay, that was when, right, Hillary beat Obama in the primaries, yes? I go up to my car in the parking garage at our church, and somebody had put Hillary 2008 bumper sticker on my car. And that, not my proclivities in voting. And I was a little frustrated and thought, who did this? And I didn't immediately identify David, but I knew, you know what? If I don't say anything, eventually they will. So I peel it off of my car and I just act cool. And I wait, and about 8 days later, David goes, I heard somebody put a bumper sticker on your car. And I went, you did it! Well, flash forward to the next time she ran against Trump in 2016. I go get a Hillary 2016 bumper sticker, and I go to where his car is parked, and I put it on his bumper. Well, where he parks on campus and how he gets to his car, he never sees the back end of his car. He goes home, pulls right in the garage, shuts the door, walks inside, never sees the back end of his car. We don't know how many weeks he drove around town with this bumper sticker on his car. And look, if Hillary was your preferred candidate, that's fantastic. For most of our congregation, it would not have been. And so one day, he finally sees it and goes, instantly, it's me, and rips it off, and Well, Miss Sweet Jean Coe, who came up to our offices 2 or 3 days a week to help sign cards in the Pastoral Care ministry. She would come several times a week. She went to David's office when the door was open and knocked, and she's about 85 years old, and said, oh, Dr. Swanson, can I please speak with you? Oh, Jean, of course, come on in. She said, well, after 62 years at the church, Harold and I are leaving. And he was like, what? Why would you possibly leave? She said, well, Harold saw the bumper sticker on your car. And for the last 3 months, we've come home every Sunday, and he goes, I don't know how a man can preach like that and support a woman like that. I just, And so Jean said, I don't want to leave, but I'm afraid for the sake of my marriage, 70 years of marriage, that we've got to go. And David said, oh, Jean, that was Case. Please. And she went, really? It was a prank? He said, yes. She was like, oh, I'm so good I don't have to leave the church. Well.
Did he threaten you to leave?
Right. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Now, that's a story that is a true incident. There was worry and fear in them, but it is humorous in the way it ends. But we know that not all of them end that way. To hear that 60% of Jim's church left the door, wow. Now, they have more than recovered. They're doing great. But we know that a lot of folks have really struggled through this time. Our senior pastor, through the last election, had 2 audiences in our church. The boomers on one particular news station and our millennials in their skinny jeans, and they were constantly over email lobbying him. Why aren't you coming out for the savior of our country? Why aren't you standing up to this candidate and denouncing him? Constantly through it. And it was really tough, but I loved when he stood in the pulpit one day and he just directly addressed it. And I'm going to try to give some observations for success in how to do pastoral care well in your church. And I believe this would be the first one. Address the place you're in the midst of your congregation. You give these various voices more power than perhaps they deserve when they are silenced or you're afraid of them and you're moving around and playing chess around them. But he stood in the pulpit one day and he said, "It is my job for you not to know who I voted for. And if you do discover who I voted for by virtue of my sermons, then I have failed at my job." Took a lot of wind out of a lot of sails. He said, my job is to teach you Scripture. My job is to point you to Jesus. My job is to raise you up. Now, these weren't quite his words. These were my words because it's a better way to put it. But to raise you up for Christ-centered citizenship and let you then be equipped to go out to the ballot box. And it really helped tremendously because it sent the subtle message to both groups. I'm not your target. Quit playing chess for me. Let's focus on the discipleship effort we have here at the church and move forward. Now, that is a uniquely Presbyterian ecclesiology, a uniquely Presbyterian way of understanding church and state, where in which the church is to be prophetic. I really appreciated what Gabriel had to say earlier, because when I heard Carmen speak of being in a meeting and there was a mention of arms, it made me think, I need to go reread my King and Bonhoeffer and get a little more equipped on what I might say if confronted with such happenings. But that would be my second encouragement for pastors. Know your ecclesiology. What is it your tradition feels when it comes to public advocacy? Where is it that your people are most appropriate? Because if you were in certain traditions and you didn't be more prophetic, act more prophetically, you would get in trouble. We're in one where I think I said it best. There was a group in town called Food Not Bombs. Food Not Bombs. Remember Food? Are they still around? I don't think so. Yeah. And they very intentionally would go to the public parks and break the law by serving more than 30 people a meal. The city has a rule that you can go with your friends to a picnic, but if you get over 30 friends at your picnic, now you have to have a license for it. And therefore, they were intentionally breaking that law to make a point and to feed hundreds and hundreds of homeless. And we at First Pres pour hundreds of thousands of dollars into homeless ministry every year. Our Compassion Corner has been around for over 20 years. We have a heart for this. They came to me and they said, why doesn't First Pres come and help us feed food in the park? And in that moment, I came up with a line that has served me well all these years. I said, we're kind of more advocates than activists. Now, I don't want that kind of a phrase to be an excuse to shy back from when activism is needed, but I recognize I'm in a tradition that's very much in the power position historically in America. And we're looking for stability and institutional partnership. We're not from the bottom up, so to say. And so my point there is be very mindful of your ecclesiology and what your particular tradition stands for. That then plays into your pastoral care situations so that you can accurately reflect as the shepherd who we are as a body. But you can also get a little backup, because if you have an upset church member that is frustrated, you can lean on our tradition, our approach. It's not just me as the pastor who won't do what you. It's not just a this. It's a, well, this is our tradition, our approach. So know your ecclesiology. Third, you got to know the law too. you got to know the law. The Johnson Amendment was passed in 1954, and it draws a line between churches and political advocacy groups. And that line was needed because the argument is, if a church is going to take donations that are able to be written off people's taxes as a donation, then they need not be in the political realm. There's plenty of opportunities for abuse to donate monies through organizations of like churches that would then influence in elections. And if you're going to be a political advocacy group, then you need to be one, and all of those monies need to be understood. So therefore, the pulpit is not supposed to be so explicit, now there's the gray, on particular voting items or candidates. Now again, power, establishment tradition that I come from, we would never have a candidate for governor come on a Sunday morning and speak in the pulpit. I mean, that would just not go over well with our people. However, our African American churches, that wonderful prophetic voice of a bottom up from slavery to be a refuge and a place for power and voice and advocacy, and what Dr. King did. I mean, their whole journey has been one in which we are a institution within our community that can and does fight for a place at the political table. Well, I've learned for an African American church that's much more comfortable and open with having candidates come, by the law, 2 invitations have to be offered, one to the Democrat and one to the Republican. Sadly, the Republicans rarely, if ever, take the invite because they feel like they might not be in a friendly crowd. And the Democrats certainly take advantage of it. And you see, Bill Clinton can preach a black sermon sometimes better than an African-American preacher sometimes. He gets a little cadence going when he's there. But technically, if you see a moment like that, an invitation should have been given to the both sides. So you need to know the law so that you can then guide your leadership team, you can guide your people, and you can say to Miss Sally, who's really upset, there's certain things legally we can't do what you're asking us to do. And I find that is a very helpful thing. So again, it's not a you versus me, it's you versus this whole context that a lot of times people don't even know about or see. 4th, proactively train your team leaders, in my case elders, and your congregation in these things. Do a sermon on robust citizenship in the election and come at it from a biblical point of view and throw some of these things in there. Being on the offense will sometimes help you not have to be so much on the defense. People will realize, oh, that's why we're not hearing this or that, rather than stewing over their agenda not coming about. Be proactive on that, particularly with one's leaders, your elders. A pastor always wants to know their elders, their ministry team are on the same page, because when that begins to fracture, it's not a healthy thing. When hard times come, it only fractures more. And so by talking about these things, vetting them, you begin to understand where are the fault lines in our congregation. And you can learn very quickly, well, you know what, maybe I am in the minority and my leadership here will not be effective, and it's time for God to find someplace else. That's not the best case scenario. You don't want that. My point is, with your leaders, you can often find the greater fractions within the congregation. But the hope and the opportunity there is if you can get them through a 3, 6, 12-month conversation about, well, what is our ecclesiology? What is the law? What do we want for our congregation? Most of all, what is our mission of discipleship and evangelism? Where does the election play into that? Does it compromise it or risk it going way off rail? Sometimes that will help people see, oh. So you can get a common understanding among your leaders, then they've got your back. And they can be the ones you can come to when Sally's really upset about something, even though Sally and Bob actually agree on the candidate. Bob's been trained to see it from our missional perspective and the way in which Sally is going to put our mission at risk or help advance it. So be proactive, and then you don't have to always be so defensive. And then along with that, sometimes you got to be okay with people leaving. It hurts, especially when you've poured hours and days into their lives. It's scary when you're looking at the budget and you know somebody leaves and we get even more lean on the budget. But Catherine Larry Alsdorf, a mentor and friend up at Tim Keller's Church and Redeemer, puts it in the frame of God's sovereignty. That if somebody's to leave the fellowship, I have to trust God knows what's best in their life and how our mission will unfold. And while it may hurt, it's not the end of the world. And if you need that kind of a church, that kind of ecclesiology that's way more politically active or on one end or the other, then you need to go find that church and to be okay with that. Fifth, I've always found it wise to be mindful of the platform and not have to worry so much about the do's and the don'ts. Okay, let me explain that. Sometimes I'll hear folks say, oh, never say this, never say that. Well, I think it depends on the platform. There are some things that I will say in a small group setting that I would never say from the pulpit. And it's not that I'm being duplicitous. It's that there are some places better to talk about harder stuff. Election. Not the election, sorry. Election is a doctrine for us Presbyterians, yes? Predestination, right? There's a popular one. At our church, we don't preach that often from the pulpit because it's a hard, technical thing to understand that it really rubs people wrong. And I found it took me a long time to see it biblically. Point being, there are some things best for a small group environment and some things not. So I don't say who I voted for from the pulpit. In a small group where it's appropriate, I will say who I voted for because I know there is a trust and authenticity and it will be a value add to whatever that conversation's about. Recently, I did a 2-part series for a church out of Detroit online. It was a webinar on the Israel-Palestine situation. Good night, talk about polarization and conflict. And I made the decision right up front to say, this is where I stand politically, diplomacy, state of Israel, all these sorts of things. I think you should know that coming in for me as your speaker. This is where I stand on some of these issues. And afterwards, I got great feedback of, I disagree with you, but I didn't have to sit there and try to listen to the dog whistles and the word usage for the whole hour. I kind of got it out of the way, and now let's get to the substance. So there might be some environments and a platform where that's helpful. Social media, not helpful. Not helpful. I would be shocked, I think, if I went back and looked at some of the stuff I put on Facebook 10 years ago. Today I just don't engage. I think we've all kind of learned people just cannot handle it. It is so disconnected from tone and feel and intent, and it's just a dog pile. It's just a dog pile. So don't engage it unless there is a plan or a strategy behind it, okay? So I'm going to give you an example of where we did that well once and where we didn't do it so well. When George Floyd happens, there is a march downtown, and the term Black Lives Matter was out there and being used before the organization came to be. Remember this? And so we had an individual on our pastoral staff go because they too wanted to see racial justice be lifted up. Now this individual certainly is not what the Black Lives Matter organization would stand for, but took a picture, put it on Twitter with hashtag BLM. Woo! It was an interesting conversation with a lot of folks. And no matter how many times that individual clarified, I mean the concept of Black Lives Matters, not the organization. That person said that till they were red in the face. It wasn't a wise move. For us, it was too electric at the wrong time and the wrong moment. Now, we, though, were invited by African-American leaders in our congregation to do a prayer walk for peace. There was a lot of the riots going on and people on the interstate and a lot of damage. Well, the African-American leaders here said, we want to demonstrate walking in a peaceful way and praying about this issue. And hey, they invited us to come. We're going. Knowing not everybody in our congregation will fully understand it, but we feel convicted. And so we were very wise and coordinated with what we're going to post and how we're going to post it and how we're going to present it. I get a call from a college, a woman who had married one of my dear college buddies, and she is way up in the Republican network of things and was put on Trump's transition team, and she was in charge of the national prayer service at the National Cathedral. And she calls me, and I'm at the YMCA trying to get changed and get out of the locker room, and she says, Case, I need a Presbyterian. I said, what? She said, we've got the prayer service for Trump, and he's a Presbyterian. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, he puts on some resume, I was born at First Pres, Jamaica Heights, New York. But let me tell you, he's not one of ours. Anyway, she's like, yeah, whatever. I got to have a Presbyterian to be a part of the prayer service. And she said, would your senior pastor do it? And I'm like, no. I said, it should have been him. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry, but we're not going to do a political campaign. We're not going to do that. She's like, that's not what this is. I said, no, I mean, it's a prayer rally, right? She's like, no. And she was right. She said, go look it up online. For 90 years, the day before the inauguration, the two candidates have come together at the National Cathedral for a service of prayer. And the whole idea is, it's hey, we've beaten each other up for a year, but it's over. We're here. We're going to bow before God and then move forward together as one. That's the idea and intent. So I shared with David, and he had the same conviction. You know, if somebody asked me to come pray, I'm going to come pray. And this was not a political rally. So, but you know your people aren't going to get that or catch that. So we went. I got to be visiting clergy and march along, and we were very coordinated that we said nothing about it to anybody. We put nothing online. Our communications department wrote our posts so that afterwards, boom, and then the next morning, which was a Sunday morning, we flew back that day, he explained, you asked me to pray, I'll pray for you. So, hard decision, perception of a very polarizing act, but one which we felt convicted about, but we tried to get ahead of all the nya and static, right? So, know your environment, know your purpose. Last two, equal opportunity condemnation. Equal opportunity condemnation for both political parties. For all political parties. I will bring up in preaching situations and examples, but I'm always keen to throw the other party under the bus too. And it helps take the wind out of the room in a good way, or the tension, I should say, out of the room. One time, this was a sermon on us as Presbyterians are not so big on imagery and the fear of idolatry from our Westminster Confession. And so I thought, how can I, in this very visual age of ours, and in our church, we got a big old statue of Jesus in the stained glass window, so we're actually not very good in holding to that Presbyterian line. But how do I help people get a sense of where the writers of the confession were coming from? So I opened my sermon with that picture we just saw in David's deal of Jesus with a MAGA hat. And then I had a picture of Jesus in the hope painting that Obama did, the blue and red painting of Jesus as hope. It was Jesus as hope and then Jesus as a MAGA hat. It worked in getting my point across about how imagery tells you something. And no matter how you depict Jesus, it's going to tell you something. So, point being, I was using both. When we use illustrations, we equally condemn both and show how robust Christ-centered Christian citizenship or other means are really the greater point. And then finally, that is that point. Aim towards Christ-centered citizens. We want robust Christ-centered citizens. I want you to vote. I want you to get out there and be in school board meetings and lead. I mean, one of my dreams with the collaborative is that one day when a young man or woman says, I'm running for Congress, their parents don't go, oh. Wouldn't it be great when your child says, I'm running for Congress, you go, wow. Because there's honor and joy and opportunity rather than what it's become. Wouldn't that be great? So when you aren't, though, getting that energy, that desire to be Christ-centered citizens from your people, I've found it helpful to phrase your words carefully, but reach behind and find out what is the fear and what is the idol. What's the fear? What's the idol that's driving your emotion, that's driving your rage, your anger? Dear woman in our church, elder in our church, you know this lady well, Carmen, her very financially successful family, leaders. We've got a building named after their family. She's a mentor in my small group. She said, you've got to help me. My niece is a Democrat. And I just can't understand her. I don't even want to go to Christmas. I mean, this is a very mature Christ-centered woman who has walked closely with Christ for decades. So she wasn't coming from a position of shallowness. But I kept pushing, what are you afraid of? And I didn't say it that way. I said it more pastorally and gently to try to get there. And it finally came out of her in such a way that she saw it for herself. And she began to separate, oh, my niece is my sister's daughter, who I love. Of course I want to be with her. This fear thing, I don't need to overwhelm her with it. And I have found in pastoral care situations that's really helpful. Sometimes when people come to you with their political angst, they just want you to be a trash can and not a toolbox. Have you heard this in marriage counseling? When arguments begin or somebody brings something up, is it the moment to be a trash can or a toolbox? Am I to be a trash can, just let you dump? Oh, can you believe? I'm so sorry. No advice, no fixing it. Whereas a toolbox conversation is, we really want to fix and work on something. And frankly, 90% of the political conversations I've had is people just want to get it off their chest. I shouldn't, as a man and a preacher, a pastor and a leader, jump to, I got to fix your angst. That's our instinct. Rather, let me help absorb it for you, and then you've got it off your chest, and we're able to move forward. But the counterbalance to that, last point, the counterbalance to that, as you're aiming for Christ-centered citizens, is that there is sometimes place for a reproof, a little bit of prophetic reproof. And it's got to be done in love and in private. Love and in private. If you have that individual that is just so full of vim and vigor and unloads it on you, you think it's trash can, but you're realizing, and maybe the Lord's pushing you, if I got a wrench out and tweaked a few things, it's actually for her benefit. Do that reproof in love. And I've got to check my heart on that because I'm I'm probably the most politically active pastor on our staff. I put yard signs in my yard and other people, and I don't care. But I've got to watch my own heart to make sure that my reproof is not because of my political persuasions, but because I really do love you. And I think by sharing this hard word with you, you're going to feel it and see it as for what it is. And I hope that's helpful. Friends, it's tough, but we're called to it. And it's God's bride. And may we be so blessed in doing just that. Thank you.